It's time for love. It's time for your love coach. Let's find out if you're ready for love. Here's your marvelous host, Nikki Lee.
Hello, and welcome to Ready for Love Radio. This is your host and love coach, Nikki Lee. Today, we're going to be talking to Rabbi David Cohen. He's a rabbi, a therapist, a podcaster, and an author. Keeps busy, doesn't he? Okay. He works with many couples, helping them to strengthen their communication skills. And you all know how important I feel communication skills are. He's the author of the book, We're Almost There, Living with Patience, Perseverance, and Purpose. It was published in 2016 and presents a vision and pathway for confronting life's challenges. He's a graduate of the Columbia Law School and the University of North Texas Program in Counseling. David, it's awesome to have you with me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nikki, for having me on your program.
I tell you what, I think we, for some reason, we don't seem to know how to communicate anymore. I don't know if we ever really knew the best ways to communicate, but, it seems like the more technology we get, the less we know how to communicate one-on-one. Do you agree with that?
I think that's absolutely right. Unfortunately, there are many benefits, of course, to the use of technology. We can communicate effectively, expeditiously, quickly with others, but the ability to genuinely listen and hear the voice inflection, to sometimes see the face of the person communicating with us, to get the broader context, that's often terribly lost in the current milieu.
Well, too, I learned one day, it was an eye-opener, that, the biggest part of communication is listening. And I think people don't realize that. They think the biggest part of communication is getting your side heard. And it's like, how about just shut your mouth and listen? Listen to what the other person has to say. And, it's so big, too, when you're face-to-face with the person, watch them as they're talking to you. Watch their facial expressions, watch their body language. Take in the whole presentation of it, not just the words, but watch everything, because so often they may be saying one thing with their words, but every other part of them is saying something else. You know what I mean?
100%, Nikki, 100%. I think it's interesting that God created us with 2 ears and 1 mouth. There's a reason for that. There's a message that we're supposed to probably listen at least twice as much as we speak. Yeah.
It's interesting, and I think, like I said, I think so many people just, and I don't remember. I saw a beautiful meme about it yesterday, but it's like, listen with the intent of hearing, not with being ready to reply. Because so often it's like the person is just sitting there just waiting to get in what they want to say, but you just get the feeling they didn't hear a word you said. It didn't sink in. They were just waiting to get their part said to you. It's like, okay, can you just, and I've even said this to people sometimes, go, just hold on a second and just let me say it again and just let it sink in for you. Just sit there and just hold on and just let me say this and just listen to the words. Don't say anything. I don't need to hear anything back. Just listen. Just let it sink in. Like you need to put them under a spell.
No, I think it's true. I think a lot of times there's anxiety even in people are they don't want to forget what they're about to say. Maybe that plays some role in it. But I do think that it's one of the most challenging things in life to just be present with another person. Certainly the therapeutic process is very much part and parcel of that, is being able to be present and to hear and to listen and almost like not to run, to respond and not to try to fix what you're hearing. And there's so many layers and so much depth to every statement that we potentially could parse and unravel a lot of what we hear, but it takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy that not everybody is willing to invest in.
Two questions for you with that. The first one, how would you describe being present when you're talking to somebody? Because I bet you that there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, sounds great." What do you mean?
So, I mean, a perfect example in the current milieu is most of us have phones that we're constantly attached to on our body, somewhere on our being. We could be sitting at home. Our phones are usually somewhere in reach or in grasp. And the part of it is put the phone down, put it away.
Yes.
It shouldn't be. You see often you'll be in a restaurant, you'll see people, and they'll be sitting across from each other. They'll each have their phones on the table. Why are their phones on the table? I mean, to really, it's really just contextual. Like I'm showing the person, I'm present with you. You're the most important thing on my mind right now. I have nothing else going on. It's symbolic, even if you're not going to pick up the phone. But just it shouldn't be there. There should be nothing else kind of in your line of vision except the person that you're trying to listen to.
Exactly. Put it in your pocket. Put it in your purse. Just put it away. Yeah, it's like I just want it out of your reach. Just put it away. And it's funny when you tell people that and they look at you funny. It's like no, out of your reach. Put it in your pocket.
Right. No, it's hard. We're addicted to these devices. I mean, there's addictive aspects to them. There's been studies about such things, and it's tricky. It's very hard for us. Like I happen to be a Sabbath observer, so every Saturday from sundown tonight until sundown Saturday night, I don't use any technology whatsoever. And I found myself at certain points in time, I'd be like looking in my suit pocket for my phone, and I'm like, oh wait, it's Saturday. I don't use my phone today. But it's so addictive. It's so powerful that it's something that we have to consciously work on. I think all of us have to work on it.
It's I was with friends and we were doing something and we went in to have a meal, and everybody's sitting down and they're all putting their phone on the table like right to the right side. It was and they all look at me and I'm like, I left mine in the car. And it's like, really? We're having dinner. I don't need my phone. No,
you're 100%. 100%. There are times when I go out with my wife and I literally just leave my phone at home because I want the time to be, not filled with distraction. That's ideal if one's able to do that. Yeah.
It's like I don't, people know that I'm away for the weekend and they're not going to call me and bug me, and it's not, business can wait till Monday, and I'm going to eat, and I don't need to know what's happening on Facebook. I don't care. So, but and people look at you funny. They just look at you strange. It's like, no, I don't need it right now. So but I get a kick out of those kind of expressions. It's like, no, don't need it. And I'm the one with the business. So, and they're going to listen to this and go, she's talking about me.
Funny.
But I just don't. Yep, it's funny. It really is. So, tell us, how did you become a therapist that has an interest in mental health? Because that's a little. I'm just going to say this. It's a little interesting. So, how did you get into that?
It's a great question. I was always in my younger years was very much primed to become an attorney, and I did in fact study law. I did focus on that professionally at a certain juncture in my life. I was also very passionate about becoming a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, and I studied for ordination as well. When in my late 20s, I found myself really trying to understand myself with greater depth. And I began to read a lot of books, a lot of psychologically insightful books, a lot of self-help books. And I came to the realization that there was a whole world out there in terms of the psychology of people, kind of the subconscious layer that impacts us, how we grew up, our relationships with our parents, our relationships with our siblings. It kind of opened up a whole world to me. And I often say to my wife, it's ironic, but like had I been exposed to that earlier, maybe instead of pursuing a legal career, I maybe would have just gone right into this particular area because it suits me. I kind of feel I like to listen to people. I like to explore with people. And I happen to have been living in Israel for a number of years at that juncture in my late 20s, early 30s, and there was a program that was offered in combination in tandem with the University of North Texas, which was actually a therapeutic program to get a program to get a degree, to get training, particularly on couple dynamics and family dynamics. So that was really my own kind of self-exploration that kind of overlapped into educating myself, and then ultimately into a program where I ultimately received a master's degree.
Okay. I could make a comment about attorneys and getting into mental health, but I'll just let that one slide.
There's a lot of different crossover in the different areas that I function in. That's for sure, both legally, religiously, spiritually, psychologically. So there is an interplay, absolutely, in all these different realms.
There's so many things in psychology that I just find fascinating. I really, really do. And there's so much in therapy and in studying sexuality that is just fascinating, especially, and I'm actually working with a woman right now and ghostwriting a book for her and studying how much our interactions when we're younger with our family and all of that and things that happened as we were growing up impact us later in life in our relationships. And it's fascinating how things that we don't even consciously remember can have such an impact on us, and how she treats that. Fascinating is the only word for it. I am just thoroughly enjoying the things I'm learning working on this. So, and I mean, I understand some people may not enjoy this at all, but I do. So.
No, there's some, in my initial stages of marriage, when I first got married, so I was always interested in learning more about marriage and how to have a great marriage, and that's something that speaks to me a lot, and growing with another person. And there were some great works. Harville Hendricks is a pretty well-known authority and author in the realm of marriage. I think it's called imagotherapy is his area of expertise. And I was astounded by the reality. I think he's been married a few times. But, you learn from your mistakes, I guess. But he talks at a great level of depth in his book about we make choices of spouses and partners without being cognizant even of what's driving us. And there's a whole layer of subconscious that enables us to pick people that maybe are similar to our fathers or our mothers, or we're trying to fill certain needs. And his whole methodology of refining and correcting his therapeutic model in marriage has a lot to do with understanding kind of our origins and how that speaks to the choices we make in the present.
Interesting. Okay. So, now, I know that every religion has very distinct views and perspectives on sexuality. And I've learned quite a bit on what different religions think, do's and don'ts, that sort of thing. So, and I do not know many details about Judaism. So what can you tell us about Judaism and your position as a rabbi and perspectives on sexuality?
So thank you for asking that question. It's a very, very important area of Jewish law, of Jewish observance, of Jewish practice, something that often is misconstrued or misunderstood. A Jewish perspective on on sexuality is one, that it's a very healthy aspect of relationships, something that's a very, very, very important. It's reserved for the marriage, for the marital bedroom, for the privacy of intimacy between husband and wife. That is certainly a core principle within Judaism. We also have a core principle where we don't necessarily believe, we do believe in the principle of absence makes the heart grow fonder on some level, and that we don't allow men and women to interact sexually whenever they want, at all times. There are limits, there are certain restrictions. There's a system in place where a married couple will be intimate at certain times. It basically patterns after the female menstrual cycle, but there's basically a system in place where there are limits and there are restrictions, but when it's a period when the husband and wife can be intimate, there are no limits, meaning they can enjoy each other to the fullest, but at a time of the month or a time of the year, depending on the schedule, when they have to refrain from being interactive. So then it's an opportunity to work more on what we've been talking about till now, on the communication piece, on the verbal cues. It's meant to really strengthen the relationship aside from the physical component, but also to deepen the physical component when that is front and center.
Okay, so even when they're married, there's limitations about when they can be sexual?
That is correct. Yes.
Interesting. Okay. But that goes along pretty much with the woman's cycle. Oh,
it is
interesting.
It is patterned after that. Yes, it's patterned after that cycle. It's also built into the concept that part of the Jewish religion, and I think many religions, is perpetuation and procreating. And I think just it works. I think I'm not this is not my area of expertise, but I think also the way the cycle tends to work is that a woman tends to ovulate at the end of the cycle. So when she's coming back with her husband to be intimate, there's more of an opportunity. It's an opportune time potentially for pregnancy and to procreate. It's definitely connected to that as well.
Okay. All right. So it's made to make it more likely that she would become pregnant.
The timing of it works out that way. So yes, that is embedded in it, but it's not the only. I mean, we believe in sexual interactions to give pleasure to each other, to focus on each member of the couple focusing on the other. So that certainly is a great value aside from potential for pregnancy. It's just explaining that the timing of it, the way it works in with that, but it's not always connected to that, because sexuality is something that plays a role throughout one's life, and it's not relevant to whether or not a woman can or can't become pregnant.
Right. Okay. Okay, so during the other times, are they free to? I had no clue about this, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around this.
Didn't mean to throw you off there.
Oh yeah, you completely threw me off with this. Okay. Well, I'm used to a religion that had all kinds of limitations on you could do it any time, but there was all kinds of limitations on what you could do. So okay, this is fascinating.
So we're exactly the opposite. Meaning, there's limitations on when you can be intimate with your spouse, so when you can even touch your spouse, even in a pretty non-intimate way. We have very rigid restrictions in that regard. But once you're in a period of time when you can be intimate, and it could go on. For example, if one's wife is pregnant, the restrictions don't apply. She doesn't have a menstrual cycle, and therefore you can have a whole 9-month period, not using that word kind of, no pun intended, but you could have a whole 9-month period there, a period of time where they could be intimate. And once you could be intimate, there are very few, if any, restrictions on the engagement in that regard. So it is exactly the opposite of what you described.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, okay. Well, that's going to put a whole new slant on any Jewish friends that are pregnant. I'll say, I know what you're up to. Okay, interesting.
However, it is limited to one person. I mean, that what's very unique, I can't speak for other religions, but we certainly believe, it's just between husband and wife. That's it. There's no, it's a monogamous relationship. There's no going outside of the marriage.
Okay. All right. Wow, this is interesting. okay, so what about intimacy together? Because, I mean, intimacy and sex are not the same thing. What about just intimacy between the husband and wife during the times when you can't be having sex? Is that limited also?
Yes, so that is in fact limited. Yes, so it's kind of all or nothing in the sense that we believe
wow.
But it's built. I mean, it's built one on the other. I mean, we believe that any level of intimacy is very, very powerful, and therefore it needs to be protected. It needs to be guarded. We don't believe in kind of casual interactions and, like, you know, pecking someone else's wife on the cheek, ideally, things like that. Meaning, intimacy is reserved. I'll tell you a very funny story. I don't know if this is, you know, maybe this is appropriate or not appropriate, but you'll decide. But, you know, I heard a story many years ago. I think it's a true story. I can't vouch 100% for its veracity, but I heard that a group of rabbis basically went to speak to President Clinton. This goes back, obviously, a number of years when he was in the White House. And so this is the late 1990s. And President Clinton wasn't there, and Hillary was the first lady, and she basically agreed to meet with the rabbis, and she stuck out her hand to shake one of the rabbis' hands. And the rabbi kind of recoiled naturally, because in our faith we don't physically touch, even a handshake of a woman who is not our spouse. So, but he's the first lady in the United States. He didn't want to embarrass her, didn't want to insult her. And in certain instances, maybe certain people would have just shook her hand. This rabbi was very clever. He decided that he was going to explain to her the beauty that we really reserve our commitment, and touch is such a powerful thing that we really reserve it exclusively for one special woman in our lives, and it could be violative of that relationship even to have a handshake with another woman. And apparently Hillary liked the explanation. She said, wow. And what's called, in Hebrew, the term is nigia, means touch. So we call it that we're shomer nigia. We guard against touching a woman who's not our wife. So apparently they say that Hillary said, this was while Bill was having all these scandals, apparently Hillary smiled as a joke. She basically said, wow, I wish Bill knew about this shomer nigia thing. Again, I don't know if it's a true story or not, but it does, whether it's true or not, it does communicate beautifully this message, or this aspect of our faith, that we really believe in the power of intimacy, and therefore we want it to be something that's special between husband and wife. We don't want them to constantly be together, kind of like in an animalistic way. We want it to be pure and holy and to be special, and therefore we try to curtail it at times to make sure that it's most powerful when it's permissible.
Interesting. Okay. Huh. This is just this. I had no idea. I'm glad I asked this question. This is fascinating. Okay. All right. Huh. Yeah, this is fascinating. Okay, I can just see now all weekend I'm gonna be thinking about something and I just can't believe. Okay. And like I said, next time I see a Jewish friend and they're pregnant, I'm gonna So.
Well, in all fairness, there are different sects of Judaism. They're all different types of levels of observance. So I'm explaining to you right now what is the traditional Orthodox approach. It could very well be that you could have a Jewish friend who's conservative or reform or some other aspect or denomination of Judaism. They may not explain it the way I'm explaining it. So I'm giving you kind of a perspective from the way I see the world and from my observance level. So you may not be able to extrapolate it to every Jew in the world, but this is the perspective that I live by and that I espouse and teach.
Oh yeah, I do know some that live extremely differently from that. So yeah, true.
I'm sure there are many. I'm just telling you kind of from my perspective. Right.
But that's interesting. All right. So tell us now that you've completely blown my mind. I've got to get my head back on track here. Okay. So what does your practice look like?
So I do a lot of things professionally, and primarily most of my time is actually spent more in the realms of, I work for a not-for-profit that actually services the disabled special needs community. That's where I spend most of my time. I also work as a congregational rabbi. So I don't have, a huge practice. I just don't have the time for that. But I do have a limited amount of clients. Kind of the max is 4 or 5 at any given time. And I work primarily with married couples who are struggling with communication, with strengthening their rapport with one another. I work with singles, individuals who are single men and women who are trying to get married, who are struggling to find a spouse. They're having blocks, different things are holding them back. Try to explore that with them. So that's where I spend, most of my energy in the therapeutic world.
I would think that alone keeps you busy.
It definitely could. I work flexibly with my clients, particularly during COVID. A lot of things were done via Zoom, by technology. Some of my clients don't come every week, so it's kind of like it works itself out. It balances itself out. But yes, It definitely can be it weighs on you, of course, when people come with you to their problems and their challenges. And even in my rabbinic role, I deal with a lot of couples that are struggling, marriages that haven't worked out. There's couples who are divorcing, trying to help them divorce properly and respectfully and looking out for the children. So there are a lot of dynamics and aspects to different roles that I play that deal with kind of marriages, most of the time helping people get married. Like I'm performing a wedding next week, actually out of New York. I'm going to take a quick drive to a nearby state and perform a wedding there, hopefully helping people get married and sometimes helping people get unmarried so that they can get remarried in the appropriate time.
Yes, you do need to do one before you can do the other. So that's the best way to do that. So is your practice just with people that are part of the Jewish faith, or is that anybody come to you?
So, over the years, I've been doing this now probably for about 15 years. So when I lived in Manhattan for many years. So there, my practice was very much members of different faiths. I certainly worked with Jews as well as non-Jews, and it was comfortable. I think oftentimes people may select me because they're faith-based. They feel like there's a certain respect for faith, and therefore they may feel comfortable with me, whatever their faith may be. I've definitely worked, with the broader world besides just my narrow community. Right now, I tend to be, this happens to be most of the clients I have now are kind of more part of my community, but I'm definitely somebody who has worked and can work with all different types of people.
Right. I think sometimes even if you're not the same faith, it's good to work with somebody who understands having faith and wanting to keep that, whatever your faith may be, keeping that at the forefront.
No, I think 100%, Nikki, like you're saying, and I think it's the opposite. I often find people who are members of my community who want to kind of have the privacy of not having to talk about all of their kind of their messiness with somebody who knows them or might run into them in the supermarket. So they may seek out somebody from a different faith, but at the same time, that person has to have a level of understanding where they're coming from, which is a faith-based system. So I think you're absolutely right. Right.
Well, one of my good friends has a non-denominational church, actually about a block from me, and he does a lot of that sort of thing. And even people that come to his sermons, he's like, you don't have to join us. He says, but be at a place where you feel comfortable, but just make sure that they're speaking from the Bible. Make sure that they're not just making up their own things, but just make sure that and when you need anything, feel free to come to us. We're here for you. Okay, so what you have a book. What inspired you to write a book?
So I basically started just kind of writing articles, different thoughts. Actually, I was giving sermons in a very transient congregation in Manhattan, and I found that from week to week, congregants were away, and I was putting a lot of effort into the sermons, and I was trying to think, how can I get this out to a larger audience? Because there was some difficulty, like without the continuity from week to week. So I began to put pen to paper, begin to kind of write things down, concretize them, began to publish them in some newspapers, magazines, and then one day out of the blue, I got a solicitation to write a book. Somebody was offering to publish a book that maybe I never crossed my mind that I could write a book or that I had material for a book. And after this person reached out, I began to look into it and discuss it with them. And I discovered that based on the writing I had done, I already had about a half a book. And then we kind of focused more on writing a book. And I wrote a book based on my own life experiences, in essence. And one of the areas that I focus on in my book is marriage and relationships, because I got married at the age of 31, which is rather late in my circles. It may not be late in the contemporary world, but in my religious Orthodox circles, it's a little later than most. And I had various challenges, trials, and tribulations to get to the point where I wanted to get to. And I learned a lot from those experiences. I gleaned a lot of knowledge, information, had spoken to a lot of experts and got a lot of insight, observed a lot of people and relationships, and I thought I had what to contribute and what to write. So I ended up putting out a book about kind of dealing with challenges and trials and tribulations and kind of holding the vision and trusting the process. And I explore that theme within the milieu of relationships, and particularly within the milieu of the early years of marriage. I'm trying to write part 2 right now. It's coming along slowly, but I hope in 2021 to hopefully have a second part of the book, hopefully ready.
Yeah, just write a little bit every on a consistent basis, and it'll get there.
That is good advice, but it never seems to happen. But yes.
Well, I have learned, because I've written a lot of books, and I've just learned you can't force creativity, but when you get an idea, jot it down, and I use the recorder on my phone a lot. And if I get an idea, I record it or I jot it down, one of the two, because I have learned that just because it's really fresh in my head right now does not mean that it will be when I get home and I have time to work on it. So I make sure that I save it somewhere while it's fresh, and then I make sure that I remember where I put it so that when I have time to work on it, I can go back and refresh my memory on what it was. So
that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I like that a lot.
Yeah. It's gotten me through a whole lot of books. And if it's just kind of stuck in your head and it's 3 a.m, it's a really good idea to get up and make those notes, because like I said, 7 or 8 or whatever time you get up, not going to be there. Not going to be there. So
I hear.
I do my best writing at 3 a.m. So
wow. I do my best sleeping at 3 a.m, but I hear you.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. But see, it's just me and my cat usually at 3 a.m, so I can do something about that. So,
I hear.
But yeah, and I do really good editing at 3 a.m. So what can you have? One of the things that everybody on the planet seems to be dealing right now is COVID. So, what kind of challenges to marriage and relationships dealing with COVID? Which, like I said, all of us are dealing with that, and being in New York, unfortunately, I think you've dealt with more of that than a lot of us have. Thankfully, we haven't had a lot of that here.
You're fortunate, and we're fortunately in a little bit of a good wave right now. Hopefully things should continue this way. We definitely were hit very hard in March and April, in May. Thankfully, the summer has been relatively mild, at least in the parts where we live, and schools look like they're going to be opening in the fall, so we're very optimistic and feel good about taking maximum precautions. But certainly, being all pent up in close quarters with somebody who obviously you care a great deal about, but what I found is that people who didn't have great relationships before COVID or the advent of COVID, so then putting that pressure and being confined to close quarters without the natural escapes that people tend to use can be very, very challenging and very deleterious and very difficult. People who have strong relationships, I think, really thrived. During COVID, it was an opportunity to spend more quality time with the people that we love and maybe often neglect or don't have the time to really invest the way we'd like to. So it really is a double-edged sword. I think it was a great opportunity for some people. I think it was challenging for others. It really, I think a lot of the proof is in the pudding. A lot really depended on the nature of the relationships. I think when you have a strong relationship and then it meets a challenge, it usually can rise to the top and thrive. But when you have a shaky foundation and then add to it the stresses of a COVID, whether it be financial stresses, whether it be health stresses, emotional stresses, so on and so forth, the insecurities of life, so that could not bode well. And I definitely saw an uptick in my practice during these months because people are in distress and they certainly need support.
I agree with you because if things were rough, people could just take off and go do something else or put space between them. But
right.
When you're having to stay at home, they didn't have that option. But you couldn't just take off and go to work, or take off and go to your friends or whatever. I mean, literally, unless you were an essential worker, you had to stay home. So yeah, I think it forced people.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I mean, it forced people to face problems that they, otherwise could have just kind of pushed off to the side. And they're like, I'll just go do this or go do that, or but you can't do that when you have to stay home. So
right.
Yeah.
I'll add.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and I'll add that a lot of us had children who were not able to go to school, and therefore kids were home all day long as well, which creates stress in terms of who's responsible for what, and so on and so forth, and even less privacy. So yeah, there are a lot of complicating, exacerbating factors, and if the relationship wasn't strong to begin with, I think a lot of people suffered.
Right. Well, and then put on top of that the fact that people weren't working and there was less money coming in, and so yeah, it just definitely, if you were ignoring any issues, they were all being compounded. So yeah,
the perfect storm, as they say, the perfect storm. Yeah,
pretty much. So you have a podcast. Tell us about it.
Thank you for asking that. So I recently started something, maybe for about a year or so. It's called the JPP. It's actually the initials of Jewish Philanthropy Podcast. I like to look at the word philanthropy not in the sense of giving money away, although that's certainly part of it. Philanthropist is a person who would rather somebody who gives of their time, who contributes to society, who helps improve society. And the Jewish piece of it is that that's a value of the Jewish people, that we like to give, we like to contribute. It's not exclusively a podcast just for Jewish people. It's for any person, non-Jew, Jew. It's not really important, but it's just because that's kind of the idea of being a philanthropist, of trying to, we call it tikkun olam, of trying to improve the world, of enhancing the world. That's one of our great values. So I launched this podcast called the JPP. I've had about 20 episodes so far, and I interview different guests who contribute to the world in different ways, and thankfully it's been well received so far.
Awesome. So what do you think about being a podcaster, honestly?
I love it. I find it to be a great deal of fun. I really enjoy asking questions, listening to the answers, kind of going deeper, kind of reading the person. I also find it a great forum to potentially network with people that maybe I wouldn't have the opportunity to meet or talk with in another forum, but maybe the value add to them to get some promotion from being on a podcast. I find it's really a great tool to be able to meet people, connect with people, to grow, helps other people, and helps me as well. I think it's a win-win across all sections.
Definitely. I say I have learned so much through all these shows. It's unbelievable. So yeah, it's well, plus I've learned how to produce a podcast. So, but yeah, it's an awesome experience. This is show number 317 of this show. So yeah,
okay.
It's an interesting experience. There are days I can't figure out. There's just nothing that excites me that I want to talk about, and sometimes it'll be the last minute, and it'll be like Thursday afternoon, and I'm like, and the show airs at 9, and it'll be like 5:30 in the afternoon. I'm like, yeah, okay, now I know what I'm talk about, and I'm like the last second getting the show ready. But yeah, I love it overall. There's, like I said, some days I just can't think of anything I want to talk about, but I thoroughly enjoy having a show. I really do.
I find it difficult, kind of the week in, week out. I find to produce new content perpetually and fresh and exciting content. I find it's a challenge. It's really so a lot of credit to you to having put out so much content. That's great. Yeah.
There's, like I said, sometimes it's just hard to come up with something. Well, and I want to be excited about what I'm putting out there. I could just do anything, but I want it to be something that I can be excited about. And that makes it tough. that makes it tough some days. But I always come up with something that I'm excited about. But yeah, it's doing that every week becomes a little bit of a challenge after all that time. But but way to go. So welcome to the podcast world.
Thank you so much.
So you mentioned having children at home while they've been out of school, and they've been out of school for quite a while now. How do children impact relationships?
So that's a very profound question. It's a deep question. We mentioned a little bit how children can be a stressor on a relationship, but I think the other direction is even more important, in the sense that children really model and echo and reflect that which they're observing in the homes that they're growing up in. Meaning, if they see tranquility, continuity between their parents, they will echo that, they will reflect that. It goes back to what we spoke about earlier in our discussion. They will feel emotionally secure in their attachments to then be able to attach to others in a healthy way. And they'll also get a perspective on being able to give and receive. The model, when you're a child, you tend to be a taker. You're receiving. And then as we mature and as we grow and as we move on in life, so then we ideally shift roles from being a taker to being a giver. If we have parents who invest in us and give to us and they fill us up, then we're able to then go and give to others in a healthy way. If, unfortunately, we're raised in homes where we're not given what we need emotionally, we tend to look at relationships from the perspective of trying to take from another as opposed to give to another. And that's where a lot of relationships are fraught with danger, because their needs aren't being met, because they have unrealistic expectations from their significant other to repair that which their parents maybe deprived them of, so on and so forth. So it's important to understand that entire family dynamic and the family system. If you're in a relationship, whether it's a marriage or not a marriage, but whatever relationship you're in, and if there are children who are part and parcel of that family unit, so that that behooves the adults in the room to kind of behave like adults and to take on the responsibility of modeling properly for the next generation.
Very true. You know, something I've noticed, and it may just be in people that I've seen, but I've watched, and I've only seen them through later teen years or in their adulthood, but I've talked to people that knew them when they were younger. Because, like I said, I'm very interested in order kind of thing. And I've seen, like, one example is somebody who felt extremely entitled to everything that she wanted, and if she didn't get it, would do anything, even to the point of setting up her father and having him jailed in order for her to get what she wanted. Okay? Mm-hmm. And another one who, no matter how much is given to her, it's never enough, and doesn't see the value of what she's given at all. And both of these people, their parents gave them everything they wanted materially, okay? Mm-hmm. But as far as giving them emotional support and this sort of thing, it doesn't seem to have really been there from the people that I've talked to. You know, the parents weren't really around. They weren't really as present as they really should have been as they were growing up, that kind of thing. And when they were given things materially, it was, I love you, and a present was always involved. I love you, and something material was involved. You know, so it was love equates something material. It was love equates a present. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I'm very familiar. You've made a fascinating point in terms of sometimes you find young adults who seemingly have everything from a materialistic standpoint, but yet they seem to be lacking. And unfortunately, it's a cycle in the sense that we talk a lot in the therapeutic world about trying to break the cycle. You know, the parents who weren't able to give in your example, the kids, their emotional, weren't able to meet their emotional needs or always just gave them a physical item, that's in all likelihood because their own parents, the grandparents in this scenario also weren't able ideally to, in the olden days, 50, 60 years ago, let's say, people were not comfortable talking about emotional health, emotional well-being, openness, and unfortunately, a lot of people suffer because of that, because it just wasn't, what people lacked. Sometimes it could be the most loving, wonderful people, they just don't have the tools or the means of communication, of communicating affection, because they themselves never got that. And again, it's a cycle, and the cycle often has to be broken in a therapeutic milieu.
True. Well, like I said, it was funny because everybody that I talked to, like I said, it was always love was mentioned right as they were given a present of some kind. So it was very much in their mind, love was associated with being given a present of some kind. It wasn't just I love you and a hug or some show of affection. It was just a strange scenario, and I even saw it when like the grandmother or the father or whatever would give them something, and that was exactly how they did it. It's like, daggone, they're right. That is exactly what they did. Mm-hmm. And even when I said something like, they're like, no, I don't. I'm like, yeah, you do. I saw you do it. But I mean, if that's done, over 10, 15 years, that's how the mind registers that. So just an interesting sort of something I thought I'd mention.
No, I understand.
But it's like I said, those little subconscious things that pattern gets in our mind, and that's how the mind sees things. Mm-hmm. So let me see. Tell us some about being a rabbi and a spiritual guide. I feel very confident that very few of my listeners have a perspective on that.
Okay. Some of your listeners probably have, I would hope, have some sort of clergy person in their lives. It may be a priest. It may be, so, I hope on some level there's some model, somebody in their lives who they look up to. And I think that it's a challenge because, you want to be like one with the guys, quote unquote. You want to be somebody who can relate to people, who's relatable, who's down to earth, people feel comfortable with, who people feel you can be friends with. At the same time, you kind of have to hold yourself a little bit apart, as somebody that people can look up to or somebody that people can aspire to be more like. It's a very delicate balance, one that I think many religious leaders struggle with, many religious leaders fail at. It's not easy, particularly in these trying times in our country when we're dealing with a once-in-a-century pandemic, when we're dealing with tremendous racial tensions across the country, and we're dealing with a big political, a lot of fracture, political parties, etc., and a big election coming up. It's a very complex time, and people definitely need people that inspire and that guide and uplift. That's a voice I think that's been missing in our society right now, in the societal fabric. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in certain places. It does, and there are a lot of great spiritual leaders and mentors, but unfortunately, particularly across social media, you don't necessarily always, connect with that or see that. So I think that being a spiritual leader or being a rabbinic personality or being an influencer is a role that I take very seriously, whether it's my congregation, whether it's my broader community, whether it's across social media platforms where I tend to publish content and be active. I feel that it's important to try to uplift, to inspire. I put out almost daily videos, 5-minute brief insights. I post them across different platforms, just trying to uplift and inspire in these trying times and these challenging times. So I think that's the opportunity and that's the challenge that that exists in the current period in time in which we live.
Very true. I think any of us, no matter who we are, trying to be encouraging, there's not a lot of people doing that. It amazes me, the people that are in the public eye that spend all their time on Facebook bashing people. And it's like, can't we share something encouraging? No matter who you are, can't we share something and sometimes even just if I go back through my memories and I'll just see some positive meme, and just share it just because, people I'm connected to need something to like be encouraging and or something to make them smile or something positive, or occasionally you'll see an encouraging or positive news story. There aren't a lot of those out there anymore, unfortunately, but I try to make an effort to share something encouraging because like I said, all of us need to see something good, and like I said, there's just not enough of that. My gracious. But yeah, there's enough negativity out there. If you want to find it, that's easy to find. But we need something positive. We really do. So what kind of lessons have you learned during this whole COVID-19 thing so far?
There's a lot of lessons. I think I've been talking about this a lot this week. I think it's a microcosm of a bigger relevant point, which is that we've had a few power outages in our neck of the woods. We had one on Tuesday. We had one again today due to the stormy weather. And thankfully, this is not a major tornado or anything like that, but we have been impacted. And one night this week, we basically went to sleep without electricity. And I think we just take the most basic things in life for granted. And I think, life was booming and everything was going great. And don't even give a thought to, like, anything, travel to family. And I believe in a spiritual sense, like the master of the universe, whatever faith, generated or based, belief each person has, but some people say the universe, whatever, I say God. But the point is that there's a message being sent to society, to mankind at large, and that is that we need to kind of reassess, take stock. Everybody needs to kind of assess just their own lives. It's important. Where are we going? Where have we been? Kind of retrench and figure out kind of what's really priority, what's really important, what matters most, which I think should be across the board, is really health, relationships. These are really the core of everything else is gravy. Everything else is gravy. You need to have some money to, put food on the table, etc. But in terms of prioritizing the spiritual over the material is something that I think is a lesson. Just kind of like to wake up and to reassess and to not get caught up in the speed of life, but to kind of be able to treasure each and every moment and not take things for granted, and just to wake up in the morning and be grateful and be thankful. Many of us have a lot to be grateful for, and I think a lot of times we just kind of like lose sight of that, like the fact that we're breathing, the fact that we're here, the fact that we can have this conversation. That's essential, and that's a privilege, and we need to kind of maybe take stock, go back to the basics a little bit more.
Yeah, that's when this all first started. That was one of my things. I was hoping that people were gonna start to realize that kind of thing, and it sometimes it takes something that big for people to just kind of wake up. Right. There's all this talk about being woke. I'm like, okay, forget all that crap. But can you just kind of stop and just say, there's a whole lot of stuff that people just take for granted every single day. Can we stop taking things for granted and say, maybe I don't need all this stuff I thought I needed, and I'm appreciative that I'm alive. I'm really glad I wake up every morning, which I am. I got fighting a whole lot of health stuff, but I'm really excited when I wake up each morning because I woke up, and I don't have the biggest and best and greatest, but that I don't care about any of that. I've got what I need. I've got a roof over my head, and I'm making it. Not making it with any flash or any of that kind of stuff, but that doesn't matter. And maybe that's okay. It should be okay.
I think you reminded me of an important point also, which is I think too many of us are looking at other people. Too many of us are measuring ourselves vis-a-vis what's going on with our neighbor, with our friend. And it's a time we kind of get all shut into our own houses, basically. The message is like, just look at yourself. There's really nowhere else to look. You don't have to compare yourself to anybody else. We're all on our own unique trajectories. You know, you do you. You know, everybody has to do them. And that's, I think that's a critical point.
Exactly. Do you to the best of your ability.
Mm-hmm.
And let everybody else do them to the best of their ability. Don't compare yourself to everybody else. That doesn't make any difference.
Exactly.
You're not doing their life. They're doing their life.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So how can people find you?
So the easiest way to find me is on my website. It's actually RabbiDavidMCohen.com. Not David, but Dovid. Rabbi Dovid, Dovid, mcohen.com. On my website, you can find my book, my podcast, links to all my social media presence. So that's really the easiest way to find me.
Awesome. Well, you officially blew my mind on a couple things, but that's okay. I enjoy learning new stuff.
I try to keep it interesting.
You know, that's what I say all the time. I like to keep it interesting, keep people wondering. That makes life more interesting, more fun.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Awesome. And listeners, I hope that you got lots of interesting information and learned new things. Thank you very much for being with me today. And listeners, I will be with you next time on Ready for Love Radio.
Some clothes.